Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the California Black Freedom Fund's second virtual community conversation. I'm Mark Philpart, the Executive Director of the California Black Freedom Fund. And before we begin, I have a little bit of housekeeping to share with you. One, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat. It's important to us that you're engaged and that people know who you are. And that you're sharing who you are, your organization, and where you're from. We want to know where you are, and we want to know who's here. If you have questions for any of our panelists or the CBFF team, you can submit them through the chat. We'll monitor the chat and be sure to account for your questions for the panelists during the session. So please feel free to insert them so that we can cull and collect and then pitch them to the panelists during the Q&A portion. This conversation is going to be recorded. We learned our lesson from the last time. We had so many people asking us for the recording who couldn't be with us. And so we wanted to prioritize recording it for posterity, for you and others in our community to be able to access. We know that there are a lot of people who couldn't be here, who wanted to be here. And so we'll have this available for them should they want to access it at a later date. If you have any accessibility issues or registration questions that you're relaying on behalf of someone else, please also put those in the chat, and JC Rafferty with Girl Friday Events will address them. Remember, for registration purposes, in order for us to kind of ensure that we have a close-knit community, we have only allowed for people to register using the link that they're sent. And so if someone else you know is trying to get into the session, they'll have to register or troubleshoot with JC at Girl Friday. So please put those questions and issues into the chat so they can be addressed immediately. Just a little bit of background. I think all of you are familiar with the California Black Freedom Fund, but I think it's always helpful to remind folks about the context in which the Freedom Fund was formed and just the positionality it holds within the philanthropic ecosystem. Many of you know the Freedom Fund was established during the uprisings of 2020, really came about as an innovative initiative that sought to really buck how philanthropic work took place in response to crises. We often know that whenever there is a crisis in the Black community in particular, philanthropic action and just the general philanthropic response is to invest a wave of funding. And then once the crisis has abated, once the news cycles have moved on, we know that that funding recedes. And the Freedom Fund was really positioned as an institution that would actually keep the momentum moving forward in terms of investment in the Black community, in Black power building organizations, really meant as an entity that would kind of agitate the sector and at the same time be a partner to movement leaders in different ways than philanthropy has engaged in the past. And so the Freedom Fund is really meant to transform the relationship between philanthropy and the Black community. And I'm excited to be at the helm. This is the country's largest fund for Black prosperity. And so we have an enormous responsibility here in California, but a tremendous opportunity as well. Really excited to be leading this work in partnership with all of you. For today's discussion, we've gathered to discuss the consequences and challenges of dismantling anti-Blackness in Los Angeles, which includes several recent incidents such as the racist leaked recordings from LA City Council members and the labor leader, and the city's response to police shootings and violence, and efforts to eliminate Black power in Los Angeles. Many of you know that at the time of the LA City Council's leaked recording, I issued an op-ed to call for their resignation and the resignation of the labor leader who was also captured in those recordings. And following that, we hosted a convening in Los Angeles where we talked about anti-Blackness in the movement and talked about the important work that was happening on the ground and what needed to happen in order to further build Black power. We also made investments in 5 organizations that were doing important work in the city, in the region, with the hope that, we would position them and support them to be able to expand and scale their work as it related to building Black political power in the city and the region. And today you'll hear from some of those folks. We're excited to have 3 community leaders and grantee partners on our panel who will share what they're doing on the ground in LA in their respective areas. From youth development to workers' rights and housing access to build power for Black communities in ways that to collaborate and support their work as it moves forward. So we're excited about this discussion. It's going to be rich, it's going to be robust, and you'll hear a lot from folks about what's happening and what opportunities exist for you to be in partnership with them, no matter whether you're a funder or whether you're a partner, a community partner from another part of the state. I'm going to do some quick introductions of them before we dive into our conversation, just so you have a sense for who you'll be hearing from. You see their names here, but I want to share a little bit more. So Jade Green is the co-executive director of the Youth Justice Coalition. Directly impacted by the foster care system, Jade organized for her mother's freedom from incarceration as a Jamaican immigrant from potential deportation that is still pending to this day. Inspired to support other impacted families and youth, Jade led YJC's Welcome Home Resource Fair, taught at Free LA High School, and served as co-chair of the board and led efforts to build healing, structure, and growth internally at YJC. In 2022, Jade was democratically elected by YJC members and staff to serve as the organization's first Black woman executive director. Welcome, Jade. Elda Solomon is the policy manager with the Southern California Black Worker Hub. Elda earned a BS in public health at the University of Nevada and continued to UCLA to pursue an MA in African American Studies. After joining UCLA Care at Work as a graduate researcher, Elda now continues her pursuit towards racial equity and policy with the Southern California Black Worker Hub. Welcome, Elda. Finally, Pete White is the founder and co-executive director of LA CAN, the Los Angeles Community Action Network, a grassroots organization to ensure the human right to housing, health, and security are upheld in Los Angeles. Pete White has been a community organizer in LA since 1992 and has educated and organized thousands of low-income people on a multitude of issues and campaigns. A lifetime resident of South Central LA, he is committed to fight for a LA that does not tolerate racial injustice, promotes an equitable distribution of resources, and includes everyone. Pete believes that organizing and leadership development are essential tools needed to achieve social change and racial justice. He serves on a variety of boards and advisory committees related to homelessness, organizing, and grassroots funding. So we are really excited about this lineup, incredible speakers who are planning to join us. And just one note for folks, we're so excited to have Pete White join us, and just want to celebrate the fact that he's on set right now and taking time to be with us. So Pete, thank you for that. I will not let the cat out of the bag, but big,
Keep that cat in. I have an
yeah,
NDA on that cat.
big things happening for LA Can. So I'm just going to start with trying to facilitate a little bit of a conversation here by asking some general questions. And I want to start with just asking this first question, which is, how did you or your organizations respond to what happened with the LA City Council reporting?
I'll start. Hello, everybody. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that, what we saw with the LA City Council thing is not anything new. I've lived in Los Angeles for the past 28, going on 29 years, and I was already very well aware of the racial tensions and all the politics that come to play in these offices. And we know that the state pushes this same dynamic in the prisons. So one of the things that we did do is that we made it a teachable moment for our students and staff so that, we could raise awareness, with our students so they could know what's going on, because it was all over the news. And I'm pretty sure, they were aware, but didn't really have the details. So we always want to make sure we politicize our students. Our high school, Free LA, is a social justice focused school, and we always want to make sure that we take moments like this of things that are happening around them and make it a teachable moment to build their awareness. So we also talked about the context of the conversation, past all the trigger words that was said in the tape. And the conversation with Neri Martinez, was really about disempowering Black political power. And so what we did too in response is that we took some of our Lobos, which is our youth organizers, to an action where we kind of spoke out, and because they wouldn't let us in. It was so funny. We were there early in the morning, and we were prepared to speak at the city council, but of course, with the politics, they locked us out. And so we said, fine, we're just gonna, convene outside. And, we spoke out there, and so did some of our other organizing folks, like, and then Pete was out there too, always representing. So, and I'm gonna let that be the segue for you to share.
Hey, Jade, thank you. Thank you, CFF, for having this conversation. I think we don't talk about this enough. Two, I don't think even to date, we've actually checked in on the sentiment in the Black community. Like, there's not been a real effort to see just how Black folks, and not Black folks who are engaged in the day-to-day organizing, but just everyday Joe Black folks. I think there's still room to have that conversation. The things that we did, a couple of things that we engaged in immediately. We felt that there was a need to take direct action, and to take direct action to say business as usual will not stand in the city of Los Angeles. When we look at the work of Professor Manuel Pastor in his works, Roots and Races, or Roots and Races, 5 years ago, it showed that Black folks were leaving Los Angeles in droves in every zip code except one, right? Except one. And that zip code would be Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles, right? That was the only place in Los Angeles that Black folks were moving to. And the irony in that is that 4 out of 10 African Americans in Los Angeles are houseless, right? And so when we think about Black erasure, when we think about Black banishment, when we think about the ways in which this happens and the destinations that we're able to map, and that destination is Skid Row, a service poor area, when we talk about just general life-saving services, the irony could not be missed. And so for us, of course, direct action was a path that we took. right? We, number one, said that the city council cannot move forward because, we still have a holdout on city council in Kevin De Leon, who is just refusing to leave. And so we knew we had to apply pressure to allies and others on the city council to say, you cannot sit with Kevin De Leon, because if you sit with Kevin De Leon, in many ways, it makes you complicit or it makes you an accomplice, right, to what was said. And so direct action, direct action, direct action. But then after that, we also understood that business as usual, yes, it was business as usual in this private conversation that ultimately was not that private, but there were also public expressions. There continues to be public expressions of business as usual. And so we took it as an opportunity to begin to bring together various left-leaning forces to say, we're going to stop business as usual in all of its forms and manifestations. The next thing that we did, so we've been working, Angelinos have been working, Black and Brown Angelinos have been working a long time, right? A long time. And so on the one hand, folks talk about tensions, right? People talk about the tensions between Black and Brown communities. And yes, tensions do exist, but no one talks about the work, the base building, the power building that is also happening with those two communities. And so we took this as an opportunity to bring those real allies back together. And, when we talk about allies, you can quickly confuse allies with all lies because those things sound exact, or they're spelled the exact same way. But we thought it was time to bring allies together to talk about what Black and Brown power and what accountability could look like, right, in this business as usual framework. And what did that mean, right? That meant that, okay, yeah, we're talking about Kevin De Leon, but now we're also talking about Black houselessness. You need to weigh in because that's business as usual. We're talking about Black jobs, business as usual. Let's talk about that now, right? We're talking about education. We're talking about raising up all the ways in which this machine continues to disadvantage our communities. And then the third strategy, so coalition building would be a strategy, right? Direct action would be a strategy. And, narrative work, cultural work, and communications work would then become a strategy, right? So the writing of op-eds, the doing of, the creation of videos and music and other cultural tools to bring community together. I think the thing that we understand, particularly in the Black community, is that the Black community is not a project, right? So when we think about what was really happening on the tape, and of course, there was a forced attempt at dividing, right? It was gerrymandering. It was Jim Crow gerrymandering. We knew what it was, right? It was imperative for us to tell the story of what the attempt to dismantle was. And it was, as Mark said earlier, it was to dilute Black power. And so when we think about the dilution of Black power, we think, of a strategy we've engaged in the last, 15 years, electoral engagement strategies, just in order to keep blocks of Black power alive. And so we've doubled down in that area, right? We doubled down and, we're looking at issues like reparations and police violence and other similar types of issues as ways to continue to build base, right? And looking at different ways to build base. And I know I went long, I'm sorry, but, those are the things that we were into and thinking about. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate that insight and just you sharing and all the work that you and comrades are doing down there. I want to turn to Elda because, it's often overlooked, but labor was a big part of this conversation. Ron Herrera, the former LA County Labor Fed director, was on the recording. and has since resigned. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what the Hub's response was, and how y'all are moving an agenda to dismantle anti-Blackness within the context of labor and within the context of all the needs of Black workers.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So, at the Hub, we're uniquely situated in the Southern California region, and we sort of pull together the different priorities of the 3 regional Black worker centers in Los Angeles and Inland Empire in San Diego. And the work that we do really is about consolidating Black worker power, Black worker voice, and working through these kinds of institutional and political level issues that we understand that the Black worker centers regionally don't necessarily have the capacity to undertake. And so, with the recordings and the release of those recordings and Ron Herrera's implication, it sort of signaled this long-standing sentiment that persists within the Federation and within organized labor largely. And I think, with the Hub and the Black worker centers, what we're trying to accomplish is, at the very kind of foundation of it is giving a worker home for those workers like Black workers who have been traditionally underrepresented in organized labor historically. And, the Federation, is a federation of unions, which is a place where Black workers have been, historically excluded from, have not been accepted into, who are not traditionally in those kinds of workforces and industries. And the worker centers, give Black workers of any type of, job or occupation or industry a place where they can make sure that their rights and interests as workers are being represented. And I think, again, it just represents the sentiment of labor that has been longstanding and the kind of insidious exclusion that Black workers have long experienced. And so with the Hub, and I think the Federation at large, there's been this huge kind of power vacuum that existed, right? And then also this huge sort of institutional shift with the election of the new president, Yvonne Wheeler, who's the first, I believe, the first Black woman to occupy the president seat. And, we really saw it as an opportunity to work within the Federation and as well, outside of the union space with other entities of organized labor that have been, again, traditionally underrepresented in organized labor, to try to find a way to kind of work through some of these deeply rooted institutional issues and sentiments of anti-Black racism, issues that women and other underrepresented groups face within the Federation, and sort of finding a way to find common ground and institutionalized measures of equity, standards within the Federation, along with new leadership that would understand, what true equity within the Federation could look like. And then, also not just necessarily within the Federation, but how do we create an organized LA labor movement that includes those who are represented in the union space, the non-union space, and move together towards building stronger labor partnerships, strengthening the Black worker base, moving strong policy that, lifts the ground for all workers. And part of that comes out in our House of Labor plans that we've created. We've created a set of recommendations that we're hoping to engage the LA Fed with. And that has kind of been a culmination of lots of different perspectives from labor leaders within the union space and outside of it. Initially, when the recordings were released, we met with 21 Black labor leaders across the region to talk about what this meant for the Federation, what this means for those who operate outside of the union space like we do, and how do we move together to make sure that we can sort of use this as a way to look really closely, again, at some of these really insidious anti-Black sentiments and inequities that are constantly occurring and perpetuated throughout the way that the system works now.
Thank you for that, Elda. And, there was a time when labor had very active programming for different racial ethnic communities to really cement their participation and deepen their involvement and their ability to ladder. I hope that through some of the work you're doing, some of that will be revived. And I know that there are active conversations around how to do that. So appreciate you and your team. Pete, you touched on something that I think is really important to hold as we think about LA. You talked about kind of like a mass exodus of Black folks. And I want to, kind of combine that with the fact that we're also facing very active efforts to further Black erasure. What is the impact on power building, given these dynamics regarding people who are both moving as well as, this how business as usual is furthering Black erasure? What is the impact on power building in your estimation?
Yeah, it's almost rhetorical, right? The impact on Black power building is if you continue to dilute communities, if you continue to dilute Black pockets of community, you'll no longer have a Black power base or a Black power voice in Los Angeles. Now, the interesting thing is the Black voice continues to be one of the moral compasses in this country. So if you have, I hesitate to say significant, but if you have a grouping of Black folks, I feel like there can be some impact to direction, like political direction. But, a lot of the efforts that we're having now in Los Angeles, are things like expanding council seats, right? Expanding them from 15 to anything as high as 30, right? Like doubling what we have. And that's tricky for the Black community who continues to lose population. So something that feels progressive could actually be the death knell to Black organizing. I think the other thing, though, that becomes important, there is still, right, even with Black banishment, even with Black erasure, there is still a significant number of Black people, right, in Los Angeles. And so for me, it really screams the need for more resources, right? Like just a really quick story. So we do electoral engagement, right? We've done a lot of the local policies, everything from ULA, that's the millionaire's tax and other things, right? And what's funny in this sort of electoral engagement strategy, yes, it's about getting people to the polls, it's about education, it's about base building, and it's about consistency. I could have said consistently as well. Now, when we first started the effort, we would we're knocking on the same doors in South Central Los Angeles over a decade. And for the first 3 or 4 years that we were engaged in the efforts, there were Black folks at the doors. The next 3 years, there were Latinx folks at the doors, and the Black folks were living in the encampment down the street in the park. Now we hit the doors and there's a lot of white folks at the doors, right? And so we see in real time in the base building that our community is scattering. And so strategically, we have to first know where our folks are at. We need to have a virtual strategy, right? That has to be part of it. But there is never, ever a substitute for relationship based base building and leadership development. And so for us, what that really means is developing the infrastructure to, like, back in the day, we were able to go deep, right? Because we knew where everyone was, right? Our outreach could go deep. Now our outreach has to go wide, right? And I think folks have to remember the city of Los Angeles, I don't think people ever think about this, is 467 square miles. And then when we're talking about the county of Los Angeles, we're talking about, the size of some states. And so because we know erasure is here, not coming, erasure is here, we've got to develop the infrastructure. We've got to build the capacity in our organizations to cover more ground and more space to bring our folks home.
I appreciate that. And it's just a good reminder, growing up in LA, I remember there was a time when there were Black enclaves, there were neighborhoods that were primarily Black, and that doesn't exist anymore. unfortunately. And so it has caused all of us to rethink our approaches in both building a base, but also just remaining in touch and in communication with people who we're organizing and building with. I want to come back to you, Jade, because many of these issues impact young people. And I'm wondering how these things are landing with the young people you're working with. It's not lost on me that at the beginning of the year, LA really had a significant surge, if you will, in the number of police killings, where officers had, I believe, killed 3 people within the first few weeks of the month. And I know young people in particular fear for their safety. And I'm wondering how you're thinking about safety planning in LA and what young people are feeling as a result of all of this.
Wow, that's a really great question. Safety planning. We have been really working on an internal safety plan recently with a lot of the things that's been going on just in our immediate community. And it does raise the question about how when the mayor came up with that safety plan, Karen Bass being the first Black woman mayor of LA, that's really significant and everything. But when she came out with that plan, there was nothing mentioned about for the youth. And that was concerning for us. We listened intently to see where the plan was to keep young people safe. And we didn't see that. So Mayor Bass recently safety plan includes like more money for cops, and there's no plan for young people. And I think that brings us back around to what been doing for the past 15 years, which is we've been pushing for a campaign to divest from police spending and invest in youth development. We were just at the BOS yesterday at an action talking about how the conditions of young people and the probation youth juvenile systems are deplorable and they're unsafe. And so if we're going to talk about keeping young people safe, let's talk about the most marginalized and the most impacted youth, which is the ones that are sitting in YA and in probation juvenile camps. And that's a huge thing for us too, because we're currently, this building that we're in is a building that back in 2013, we shut down because, the plan is not to lock young people up in cages. We need to have something better to keep young people safe and prevent and have a more preventative thing, right? But yeah, I just wanted to like go there with that. And and by the way, we did get those measures 2, 5, and 6 were passed that did actually focus on a better plan for youth probation. So just showing up and constantly advocating and keeping the youth voice and focus in the forefront is definitely a part of it. So
Yeah, thank you, Jade. I know that despite those wins and successes, which include the Youth Development Department, there's still a lot more to do. And we hope that we can be a partner to y'all as you're in pursuit of those goals and objectives.
can I want to add something else?
Please.
We are currently doing, we have community alternatives to 911, something that we started years ago that's branched off, and we're looking to really like push that now, because we know that police have never kept us safe. And we know that we keep us safe. If we even go all the way back to the Black Panther Party movement, it was the people in the neighborhood that kept the neighborhood safe. And so we want to run that back, right? Black liberation has always been grounded in community, right? And so, so community alternatives to 911, or what we call CAT 911. It includes, trainings for violence. Actually, we're having one coming up this April 1st, Saturday, April 1st. And we have a couple of chapters that launched back when we started in 2019. And so these things include, because when we think about safety, it's not just safe from police, it's also substance abuse prevention, keeping our folks safe from, the opioid crisis, cop watch, of course, medic training, because, there's a lot that goes into, like, if reporting and things happen, if we enter these hospitals, then police can still be involved, and we don't want that. So having folks in the community who have medic training, and also people that are in mental health crisis. We recently saw with, I can't remember the names, but something recently in the news that I think of the teacher, I think that was BLM's Keenan Anderson. He was a teacher and having a mental health crisis and lost his life because law enforcement did not know how to handle that. So having mental health crisis intervention are also other ways that CAT 911 keeps the community safe and keeps the community involved. Because once again, we are the ones that know what it is that we need to keep ourselves safe, not police. So I just wanted to add that CAT 911 piece that we are constantly working to roll out in different ways. And we do have chapters across LA County, Long Beach, San Fernando Valley, San Gabriel Valley, and there is a South Central and CAT 911 and Chuco's, the community center here is also filling that in. We're actually partnering with Charles Drew Medical. That's right, Charles Drew Medical. They're actually going to be setting up a site here coming up in July so that we can offer these type of services to our young people. So I just wanted to add that.
I appreciate it. Love the community health, public health orientation to safety, and think that we need to continue to scale efforts like that, and just appreciate the grassroots innovation taking place in LA on that front. Elda, I want to come back to you, but I want everyone to kind of get ready to kind of close out and transition. I want you to be thinking about this final question, which is about what people, funders in particular, need to know about the goals or initiatives you're focused on this year. But before we get to that, I want to come to you, Elda, and ask really about this relationship between labor-based building and power building. I think it's often ignored and not well understood, and hope that you can just shine a little bit more light on that for us. As you know, this is a community that is focused on Black power building, and oftentimes labor and its importance is not as well understood as I think it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, there's no way to understate the lengths that, different governments and administrations, and through time, since the mid, maybe 50s or, towards the end of the last century, like the way that different powerful leaders and administrations have worked to undermine the connections between organizing and worker power. I think there's always historically been sort of an agenda that's equipped corporations and other large entities to kind of undermine and sever the powers that people have, and the collective bargaining and the collective power building and base building that organizations have with workers. And I think that's been a decades-long project in trying to undermine worker power broadly for all workers. And then when you look at Black workers, those who have been, a group in a population that has been historically disenfranchised, underrepresented, marginalized, to say the least, I think then the mechanisms that, work to undermine worker power and just civil rights and base building in that way are even more, eroded, when you look historically. So I think the conversation really begins when you start to think about, who are the actors who have worked to benefit from this erosion of power and kind of about base building, power building, and organizing. And I think, again, specifically when you look at labor and collected or organized labor, you find that Black workers have always been historically excluded. And I think right now the benefit and this sort of renaissance in worker organizing that we're seeing, you have Chris Smalls in the Amazon warehousing, you have the first Starbucks union forming, and all of these different folks who are in sectors that have long been organized or who are now newly organized in places like retail and in areas that Black workers are overrepresented, and things like public sector work, in retail and manufacturing, warehousing, things like that. And we're starting to see, again, this renaissance in worker power and this consolidation of workers' rights. And it's a really incredible time to be involved in labor organizing and base building, because there's this renewed energy around it. And I think that's the product of, the summer 2020 and all of the things that happened there, and this sort of racial reckoning of the US that we're experiencing now. And so I think right now it's high time for organizing. It's high time for base building with workers. And what's really special about labor, and I say this all the time, is that everyone's a worker. We're all workers here in a lot of different ways, but the workers that we organize are not so far different than the people that we are. And I think it's really easy to identify with workers and to show workers a way to identify with each other, because it's a common thread that runs through, I would say probably 99% of Americans. So I think labor is a really special place to begin with organizing. I think it's a really valuable place to begin with base building, and a place that's often overlooked, but there's so much collective power there historically, and that power only stands to grow, I think, now.
I love that. Thank you. At some point, we'll have to have you and your squad come back and break down the different tactics and strategies employed within the context of labor organizing, because it's really rich stuff. I want to turn to all the panelists now and just ask you to kind of reflect on this question, which is, what do you want funders to know about any particular goals or initiatives you're focused on this year? What are some of the key takeaways that you want people to walk away with after this conversation? Pete, I can start with you.
Why, thank you. First, I just want to give it up to both Elda and Jade. I felt like this conversation could go on 2 hours because there was so much. It was so rich, and I wanted to hop in there. So just a few things. So for the funders and others in the crowd, I think the first thing is understanding that Black organizations, Black power building organizations, need unrestricted long-term funding, right? I feel like I cannot say that enough. We have got to build the capacity of the organizations, to continue to do this work. I think Jade was spot on when she talked about innovation. Elda was spot on when she talked about innovation. So many of the organizing models, so many of the tactics are born in the Black community, but then are also sort of stripped and assigned elsewhere. And so we have to build organizing capacity in the Black community. I think we also have to be open for funders, be open to following the organization's models, right? Like, instead of assigning like, this is what you need to do, find out what the organizations are doing today, and get behind that. I think the initiatives that are happening for LA Can, for sure. We have a ton of cultural initiatives. And when I say cultural, I'm talking about communications-based things. We put out books. We've got a movie coming out right now, because we believe now is the time that we've got to build a bigger megaphone. We know we have models of work that work, right? We have models and strategies that have been imported, and they have definitely struck gold in other places. The problem that we have is the ability to import the stories in mass. And so instead of reaching 1,000 eyes or 10,000 ears, we need to broaden that. We need to be talking about 20,000, 30,000, a million eyes and ears. The other things that we're doing that we've always done, like, so the three integrated strategies, and I'll be quick here at LA Can, is community power building, community improvement, and then community service. On the community improvement side, social innovation is always important to us. And so we're in the process of developing a model development in communities that will house with dignity and respect houseless brothers and sisters, right? And give them pathways. It's called eco-hoods. And so there's plenty to be funded, but I would just say, don't think about Black organizations as projects. Don't think about what we can accomplish in 1 or 2 years. Think about what the investment looks like in the next decade if we scale up. That's what it is.
Jade, you want to jump in?
Sure. And thank you for that, Pete. You always got me taking copious notes. Every time I hear you speak, like I just want to just big you up one time because you got that. And so, and yeah, to what Pete was saying, when he talked about unrestricted long-term funding. What I heard was generational funding, that that there's always opportunity to fund for these things because the issues in our communities has been generational in order to correct this. So I'd hope that funders will walk away with two things. One, support divestment from police. YJC is currently fundraising $10 million to purchase Chuco's Justice Center so that we are no longer being an organization that's houseless. We got gentrified out of our previous spot, and we want to make sure that there's a home for us to continue to do this work. There's not a more tangible example of prison abolition than Chuco's Justice Center. Again, this is a former detention center for young people, and it is a powerful piece to say that what a grassroots organization can do to shut one place down and resurrect it into a place for that was once erected to criminalize and punish youth. Now we're here to educate and empower, and we're turning courtrooms into classrooms. So, and the second thing is to provide generational investment in Black-led organizations. YJC and groups like us can use funding to support community ownership of our buildings, as I said, like Chuco's Justice Center. And we also encourage funders to support organizations with generational funding without having to chase grants down every 2 to 3 years and think, after 3 years, we're like getting nervous again because, we don't know how we're going to pay our bills after that, right? So, we just really encourage funders to support that. And we want to definitely thank big up to California Black Freedom Fund. So thank you, Mark, Pete, and Edna for all of the dope work that y'all do and continue to do. And I feel very honored to be working along with y'all. So
thank you, Jade. Yeah, appreciate you, Pete. And I know you got to run, but we're going to turn to Elda while you depart, Pete. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, just to add on to all of the brilliant things that Jade and Pete mentioned, I think something to emphasize is just the urgency of now, and that there are so many things that are coalescing onto the Black community, onto the labor movement, that make this such a crucial, not only a political window, but just like a really essential time where there are just so many different factors converging to make this a really critical time. I think if you consider The Biden administration has been one of the more pro-worker administrations we've seen in quite some time. There's this large infrastructure bill that's looming and lots of opportunities for workers and those in the Black community to access this sort of economic security through work. And that there are so many opportunities to advance resources and protections for Black workers, and that there's urgency in base building, there's urgency in policy and organizing, and that there is no time to do the work that we're doing, unlike now. So I think, just the urgency, and I just to kind of voice what, Jade mentioned, that there are so many different kind of like tentative feelings you have when you don't have funding that's unrestricted and long-term. And when you consider organizations like ours who work with, folks in the union space, the LA Federation, the state federation, and we're trying to do the hard work of building coalitions, if you know, and trying to do the hard work of trying to bring all of these people to the table who, you want to be part of this collective Black vision. That takes a lot of resources, it takes a lot of time, it takes staff. And it's, a lot of the times but that time and that resources is what we're running short on most of the time. It's no lack of passion and no lack of, willingness and voice. So that would be my message, and the urgency of now for sure.
Thank you, Elda. Jade, I see you. We got to jump, sis. Go ahead. Just jump in.
Just really quick. You are all invited to join us to support us this Saturday at our 20-year anniversary event. We are celebrating 20 years of movement building. And I can drop the link in the chat and stuff like that. But we have a lot to celebrate. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Shameless.
We'll send it to all the participants, and I'm planning to be there. So I'll see you. Right on. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to my amazing colleagues. I just like to ask that everyone give Elda, Jade, and Pete a round of applause. Show some love in the chat. I'm going to turn to my incredible colleagues, Carmen Ross and Keisha Sexton, to take it away from here. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Mark, and thank you to the panel, especially Jade and Pete and Elda, for sharing your work and your insights. The conversation was so informative. I was definitely taking a lot of notes and learning a lot, and I appreciate you all sharing your story with us. So my name is Keisha Sexton. I am the Director of Operations and Engagement with California Black Freedom Fund. In my role, I'm specifically supporting with our strategic direction, supporting with our networks, as well as other Black-led organizations to really ensure that we're supporting the community building that is happening on the ground. Today's conversation was so informative, and I'm walking away with the urgency of now. That supporting Black power is not a project, it's a lifetime commitment. And we're so thankful for the work that was shared today. And I want to introduce my colleague, Carmen Ross, who's going to share a little bit more about our grant making process and how we're supporting Black-led organizations.
Thank you so much, Keisha. I'll just say one highlight from the conversation: Black voices continue to be a moral compass. There's never a substitute for the relationship-based base building and leadership development. And so I am proud to serve as the program director with CBFF and support work like this. In my role, I'm supporting our overall fundraising and grant making work. And so we just want to encourage all of you to stay engaged with the California Black Freedom Fund and connect with us if you are interested in funding Black power building in Los Angeles. This was a highlight of the work that we were able to support in this past year in 2022. And our next community conversation will be in June. So stay tuned for details on that. And one other thing that I want to share with you all is that in a few months, CBFF will be dropping a request for proposals through our listserv to continue to support Black power building organizations. Until then, we are furiously fundraising so that we can have as robust of a grant round as possible. So be sure to connect with us so that we can go ahead and capture your email information, follow us on social media, and check out our website. All the information is in the slide here. And as noted before, we will be sharing a recording of this conversation in a follow-up email for those who would like to rewatch or share with anyone who wasn't able to attend live. Thank you so much, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you.